London, 1817. The city moved like a grand clockwork of elegance and ambition, its carriages rattling over cobblestones slick with rain, its drawing rooms humming with laughter that hid the sharp edges of gossip. In the wake of the Napoleonic Wars, England sought beauty as if to forget the ugliness it had witnessed. The season had begun again, and with it came the endless parade of silk gowns, whispered alliances, and reputations as fragile as spun glass. Amidst this world returned Adrian Blackwell, the newly inherited Duke of Everley. He arrived in silence, his carriage unmarked by the ribbons or fanfare that usually heralded a nobleman's homecoming. Those who remembered him from his youth whispered of his transformation. The boy who once charmed London with his quick wit and dark eyes had become something colder, something carved by war. Now, when he entered a room, conversations faltered. He was tall, severe, his presence commanding without a word spoken. The Duke's composure was legend. He neither smiled nor flinched, as if emotion itself had been stripped from him by the battlefield. Everley House, his London residence, stood like a sentinel of stone. Within its walls, the Duke examined ledgers rather than portraits, treating affection as a weakness that distracted from duty. His estates were sound, his reputation impeccable, but his family, it seemed, had not learned the same discipline. A letter arrived one morning, sealed in panic. His steward wrote of unpaid debts and a scandal brewing around Lord Simon Blackwell, his younger brother. Adrian read the words twice, the paper trembling only slightly between his fingers. Simon had always been reckless, chasing pleasure as if it might redeem him. Now, that recklessness threatened the family's name. The letter mentioned a lady. Lady Eleanor Whitcomb, daughter of the late Viscount Whitcomb, a man ruined by cards and the company he kept. The Viscount had died disgraced, leaving his daughter to navigate a society that measured worth by lineage and wealth. Eleanor possessed neither. She lived under her aunt's strained protection, attending balls more as ornament than participant. But she was known for her intellect, her sharp observations, and the stubborn independence that made many matrons uneasy. She did not laugh easily, nor did she flirt for advantage. Those who underestimated her found her conversation disarmingly precise. It was at Lady Pennington's masquerade, beneath chandeliers blazing with candlelight, that the unfortunate encounter occurred. Simon, flushed with drink and arrogance, had cornered Eleanor in a gallery away from the dancing. He had whispered promises that meant nothing, words she dismissed with the poise of a woman accustomed to insult. Yet as she turned to leave, a misplaced step, a curtain torn loose, drew attention. Guests looked up just as Simon caught her arm. The scene lasted seconds, but in London's cruel economy of rumor, it was enough. By morning, the scandal had begun to bloom. Compromised, the word slid through drawing rooms like perfume, sweet and poisonous. Eleanor's aunt wept. Invitations ceased to arrive. Her name, once merely disregarded, became a warning whispered to other debutantes. For Adrian, it was intolerable. The Blackwell name could not be soiled by the foolishness of a boy and the gossip of women. That very evening, he summoned his brother. Simon arrived disheveled, defensive, already rehearsing excuses. "It was nothing," he insisted, pacing before the fire. "A misunderstanding. I meant her no harm." Adrian's gaze remained fixed on him, unblinking. "You meant harm the moment you forgot your station." "I will make amends," Simon stammered. "Perhaps she'll understand." "She will not." Adrian's voice cut like tempered steel. "You will leave London tonight. I will handle this." The following morning, the Duke of Everley called upon Lady Eleanor Whitcomb. The visit itself caused a small sensation. Dukes did not frequent modest houses in Mayfair without purpose. Eleanor received him in her aunt's parlor, a room that smelled faintly of lavender and resignation. She curtsied, not deeply, but correctly. Her eyes met his, steady and unreadable. "My lady," Adrian began, every word deliberate, "your reputation has been endangered by my brother's behavior. It is my duty to repair it." "I thank your grace for the acknowledgment," she replied, voice cool. "Though I fear some things, once spoken, cannot be unsaid." "Indeed. Which is why we must act with speed." He paused, the faintest hint of discomfort flickering in his expression. You will marry me." For a moment, the world held its breath. Eleanor did not faint, as some might have. She merely regarded him, as though studying a painting she could not decide to admire or condemn. "You presume much, your grace." "I presume necessity," he answered. "Without a union, society will destroy you. It will not spare my name either. A marriage will silence both." Eleanor's lips curved, not into a smile, but something sharper. How noble! A transaction sealed in silence. "Tell me, is this an offer of mercy or command?" He did not flinch. "Both." Her aunt, pale with shock, whispered for her to accept. Yet Eleanor's pride, long her only inheritance, rebelled. "I will not marry for pity." "It is not pity," Adrian said, and for the first time, his voice carried a trace of feeling, something buried but real. "It is protection. For us both." Outside, the rain began to fall, tracing silver lines down the window. Eleanor turned her gaze toward it. "Very well," she said softly. "If society demands a sacrifice, let it be mine. But do not expect affection, your grace. You have offered none." He inclined his head once, the gesture almost respectful. "Then we are agreed." 3 days later, they were wed. The ceremony was brief, attended by witnesses who would later speak more of the Duke's composure than the bride's beauty. He did not take her hand except when duty required it. When the vows were spoken, his expression betrayed nothing. Yet Eleanor, watching closely, thought she saw a flicker in his eyes, a shadow of something restrained too long. London reacted with savage delight. The harsh Duke weds the ruined lady. The scandal that might have destroyed them instead became the season's favorite entertainment. Some said it was generosity, others punishment. Yet for Eleanor, the reality was neither. She traveled to Everley Hall as a stranger in her own life, seated opposite a man she did not understand. The journey was long, the silence between them longer. At last, the carriage rolled through wrought iron gates, and the estate revealed itself, vast, ancient, beautiful in its loneliness. The windows glowed faintly in the dusk, like eyes that had watched too many years pass without laughter. Adrian stepped out first, offering his hand with a soldier's precision. She hesitated, then accepted. The air smelled of rain and roses gone wild. Behind them, servants waited in perfect stillness. He turned to her, his voice low but certain. "This is Everley," he said. "It is now your home." Eleanor looked up at the towering stone, the dark ivy crawling across its face. "A fortress," she murmured. "A refuge," he corrected. She met his gaze one last time before they entered. "We shall see, your grace." As the great doors closed behind them, the sound echoed through the hall, a sound like finality, or perhaps the beginning of something neither yet understood. The days that followed at Everley Hall unfolded in a rhythm both measured and unfamiliar. The grand estate, with its endless corridors and echoing silence, seemed less a home than a monument to restraint. Eleanor awoke each morning to the distant toll of bells from the village church, their sound softened by fog that clung to the moors. The Duke, she soon discovered, rose even earlier, vanishing into his study long before breakfast. They shared a house but not a life. At first, she told herself she did not care. She had entered this marriage to survive, not to dream. Yet the quiet pressed upon her like an unspoken challenge. The servants, loyal to their master, watched her with polite suspicion, uncertain whether to treat her as mistress or guest. She responded with dignity, managing her affairs with the composure of a queen holding court in exile. She reorganized the household ledgers, re-established contact with local charities long neglected during Adrian's absence, and began visiting the tenants who worked the Everley lands. Her kindness won small, cautious smiles. The Duke, when he noticed, said nothing, but his silence lingered longer upon her. Adrian observed her from a distance, as he might a storm gathering over the horizon. Her presence unsettled the order he had built since returning from war. He had thought to protect her, not to admire her. Yet admiration crept in, quiet and unwilling. When she entered a room, the air seemed to shift. Her voice, calm yet unyielding, reminded him of discipline, not the kind drilled into soldiers, but the courage to endure isolation with grace. Still, he kept his distance. Emotion, to him, was a battlefield where no victory could be trusted. At dinner, their conversation was sparse but precise. He asked after estate matters. She answered succinctly, occasionally with wit that made him pause. Once, when he commented on her efficiency in the household accounts, she replied, "A woman without fortune must learn arithmetic, your grace, or perish by the sum." For a moment, his composure faltered. He almost smiled. In those rare moments of levity, something fragile began to take shape between them, something neither dared name. Yet beneath it lay the weight of unspoken histories. Adrian's nightmares returned with cruel persistence. Some nights, Eleanor heard footsteps pacing in the corridor, the soft creak of floorboards, a door opening and closing. Once, unable to sleep, she followed the sound to the library. There she found him, standing before the fire, a glass of brandy untouched in his hand. The light cast deep shadows across his face, revealing exhaustion more profound than any wound. She hesitated on the threshold. "Forgive me," she said quietly. "I heard movement." He did not turn. "Sleep eludes me." "The war," she ventured. He drew a breath, slow and deliberate. "The war ends only on paper. In the mind, it continues." His honesty startled her. She had expected indifference, not confession. Crossing the room, she stood beside him, watching the flames reflect in the glass. "I know what it is to live among ghosts," she said. "They do not vanish simply because one wills them to." He looked at her then, truly looked, as if seeing not a wife forced upon him but a soul acquainted with solitude. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was full of understanding. From that night, their exchanges grew less guarded. He began to join her on walks through the gardens, the winter air sharp with the scent of pine. Once, when she bent to examine a frost-covered rose, he remarked that she seemed impervious to the cold. She answered, "I have had much practice." The simplicity of her response struck him harder than he expected. Yet just as warmth began to stir, the outside world conspired to chill it. Simon returned without warning, his charm worn thin by excess. He appeared at Everley uninvited, claiming contrition but reeking of desperation. Adrian's jaw tightened at the sight of him, but Eleanor, ever composed, greeted Simon with courtesy that shamed him. The younger man attempted to joke, to reduce the past to folly, but his laughter faltered under Adrian's stare. That evening, over port, the Duke spoke quietly but with finality. "You will not return here again until you have earned the right to stand without lying." Simon left before dawn, his carriage wheels vanishing into mist. Still, the damage lingered. Within days, whispers resurfaced in London. Rumors that Eleanor had ensnared the Duke to restore her fortune, that Simon's disgrace was merely pretense for her ambition. The gossip slithered back through the capital, finding eager ears. Letters arrived at Everley, unsigned, cruelly inventive. Eleanor burned them unread, yet Adrian noticed the tremor in her hands as she fed the fire. One evening, after yet another message arrived, she turned to him with uncharacteristic bitterness. "You see, Your Grace, charity breeds suspicion. Perhaps it would have been better had I remained the ruined lady. At least then, I was honest in my downfall." He looked at her with a steadiness that unsettled her anger. "You are not the cause of their malice. You are the proof of what they envy." She laughed softly, without humor. "You speak as though you believe it." "I do." But his reassurance, sincere as it was, could not quiet the weight of society's scorn. The walls of Everley, once sanctuary, began to feel like a gilded cage. Eleanor grew restless, walking the halls late into the night. Adrian noticed but said nothing, uncertain whether to approach or retreat. He had fought battles with strategy, but this quiet suffering, left him disarmed. The tension between them reached its breaking point one storm-filled afternoon. Rain struck the windows in furious bursts as they argued over nothing, the arrangement of a dinner, a trivial estate matter. Yet beneath every word lay deeper truths unsaid. Finally, Eleanor's composure fractured. "You command even your kindness," she cried. as though affection were a weapon you dare not unsheath. He stepped forward, eyes dark with restrained fury. You think I feel nothing? You mistake control for absence. Then prove it, she challenged, breath trembling. Say something not bound by duty. The silence that followed was unbearable. He could not. Years of restraint, of believing emotion to be weakness, bound his tongue. Eleanor's expression softened with sudden sorrow. I do not need your protection, your grace. I need your truth. And with that, she turned from him, leaving him alone with the echo of her words. That night, Adrian walked the grounds long after the rain had ceased. The moon hung low, veiled by drifting clouds. He realized that in shielding himself from pain, he had also denied himself grace. Eleanor had endured mockery and loneliness with courage he could scarcely comprehend. In her defiance, he saw the reflection of the man he once hoped to be. When he returned to the hall, a single candle still burned in her chamber window. He paused beneath it, his breath visible in the cold air. He could not yet enter, could not yet confess what had begun to awaken within him. But for the first time, he desired to. The fortress of Everley no longer felt invincible. It felt alive, trembling under the strain of something approaching tenderness. Inside, Eleanor sat by the window, unaware he stood below. Her heart ached with confusion, yet beneath the ache flickered something perilously close to hope. Winter deepened, and with it came the brittle stillness that precedes change. The halls of Everley grew colder, the silence between its master and mistress now threaded with regret. Weeks passed since the storm-born quarrel, and though civility remained, warmth did not. They met at meals, spoke of estate matters, and parted like diplomats of a conquered land. Yet beneath their restraint lingered the pulse of something unspoken, a longing neither would name. It was Eleanor who first felt the shift, the subtle absence of letters from London. Then came one, folded too neatly, the seal unfamiliar. When she read the contents, her breath caught. Someone had accused her of infidelity. The accusation was viciously crafted, its details cruelly precise. An invented liaison, a supposed lover from her father's old circle, timed conveniently to coincide with Simon's return to the city. The letter implied that Adrian's marriage had been a deception, that his wife had never been faithful. Eleanor stared at the words until the ink blurred. For a long moment, she could only hear the faint ticking of the mantel clock, steady as judgment. She folded the letter and burned it, watching the paper curl into ash. But the poison it carried had already seeped into her veins. When Adrian found her later that evening, she was seated by the fire, her face pale with exhaustion. "You have been unwell," he said quietly. "Shall I send for the physician?" "There is no need," she replied without looking up. "I have merely grown tired of defending what should require no defense." He frowned, uncertain. "To whom do you refer?" "Everyone, it seems," she answered. "Even to you." Her voice, calm yet edged with hurt, unsettled him. He reached for the truth but found only silence. He had heard whispers in London through correspondence, half-formed rumors he had dismissed. Now, confronted with her weariness, doubt coiled where faith should have been. She saw the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes and rose slowly, as though the very air had betrayed her. "So it is true," she murmured. "You do not believe me." "Eleanor," he began, but she lifted her hand. "Enough. I would rather be condemned by strangers than pitied by my husband." With that, she left him standing before the fire, the sound of her retreat a quiet ruin. The following morning, she was gone. Only her wedding ring remained upon the writing desk, gleaming like an accusation. Adrian stared at it, his thoughts a tangle of disbelief and dread. He had not meant to doubt her, yet his silence had done what no slander could, driven her away. For days he searched for distraction in routine, but each hour without her hollowed him further. The estate grew lifeless, even the servants moved with subdued unease. It was Simon's arrival that broke the paralysis. He appeared unannounced once more, this time sober but visibly shaken. Adrian's fury ignited the moment he entered. "You dare show your face?" Simon met his glare without defiance. "I came because I have wronged you both. The letters, Those lies, they were mine. The confession hung heavy in the air. I thought to frighten her, to unsettle you, to buy myself time with the debts I could no longer hide. I never imagined she would leave. Adrian's fist struck the edge of the desk, splintering wood. You fool. Do you understand what you've done? I do now, Simon whispered. She went to Whitcomb Manor. She said she wished to remember who she was before you. That's all I know. Without another word, Adrian left the room. The night that followed blurred into motion. Orders shouted, horses saddled, roads taken at reckless speed. Rain returned, cold and relentless, blurring the boundaries between road and sky. The Duke of Everley rode as though the world itself demanded reparation. His cloak whipped behind him like a dark banner, his face set with a desperation no title could disguise. Whitcomb Manor awaited at the edge of ruin, its windows dark, its gates long untended. He dismounted, boots sinking into the wet earth, and forced the door open. Inside, time had gathered like dust, faded portraits, broken furniture, the scent of neglect. In the dim light of a single candle, he found her. She sat beside the hearth, wrapped in a shawl, her eyes reflecting both surprise and sorrow. You should not have come, she said softly. He stepped closer, rainwater trailing from his coat. I should never have let you go. Her expression remained guarded. You believed them. You thought me capable of deceit. I believed in my own fear, he answered. Fear that I was unworthy of what I could not control. You were never the one in question. It was I. The words trembled, unpolished, drawn from a place long buried. He sank to one knee before her, not in ceremony but in surrender. I once told you to marry me or be ruined, he said. Now I see the truth. Without your forgiveness, I am ruined still. The silence that followed was broken only by the crackle of the fire. Eleanor's hand, steady yet trembling, reached out. Her fingers brushed his cheek, tracing the exhaustion etched there. You have built walls so high, she whispered. I thought nothing human could survive within them. He caught her hand, pressing it to his lips. Then let them fall. Let everything fall. Tears rose unbidden, neither dramatic nor forced, but honest, the kind that come when pride has no refuge left. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw not the Duke, not the commander, but the man stripped of armor. I never sought your pity, she said. Only your truth. You have it, he answered, voice unsteady. You have all of it. For a long moment, neither moved. The world beyond the walls faded, the rain, the wind, the years of distance collapsing into the fragile peace between them. Then, with quiet certainty, she leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. Then come home, Adrian, she murmured. If there is to be a future, let it begin without fear. When they returned to Everley, dawn was breaking. The estate, washed clean by the night storm, shimmered beneath a pale sun. The servants gathered in surprise, murmuring blessings as they entered the hall together. Something indefinable had shifted, even the air seemed gentler. Adrian looked upon the place that had once been his fortress and realized it now resembled something far rarer, a home. Days passed, then weeks, and the rhythm of their lives changed quietly but irrevocably. They dined not in silence but in conversation, laughter threading through rooms long accustomed to restraint. Adrian resumed his duties with renewed purpose, yet no decision was made without her counsel. The village soon noticed the transformation. The Duke of Everley, once feared for his severity, was now spoken of with cautious admiration. And Eleanor, the woman society had once pitied, had become its quiet triumph, proof that grace could outlast scandal, and love could outlive pride. But some nights, when the world slept, Adrian would rise and stand at the window, watching the moonlight spill across the fields. He would remember that ride through the storm, the moment her voice called him home. Each time, he felt the same quiet gratitude, that ruin had been the path, and love the destination. In the drawing-room below, Eleanor often waited, reading by the fire until she heard his steps. When he joined her, they spoke little. Words had served their purpose. Silence, now, was a comfort shared. And though the season in London would spin again, with its endless dances and intrigues, neither of them cared for its approval. They had built something truer within the stone walls of Everley, where pride had surrendered to devotion, and duty had finally learned the shape of love. Outside, the last of the winter frost melted into spring, and the roses, long dormant, began to bloom once more, delicate, defiant, and enduring, like the hearts that had learned at last to belong.